everyone. My name is Kate Sinnott, and I'm a master's student in ecology at Utah State University in Dr. Karin Kettenring's Wetland Ecology and Restoration Lab. And today I'm talking about my master's research on aquatic plant revegetation in the Provo River Delta. So first off, I just want to define what I mean when I say aquatic plants. As you can see on the slide here, it's a bit of a spectrum. So I'm referring to everything to the right of emergent plants, including floating leafed plants, free floating plants, submerged plants, and I'm also looking at one genus of algae. So let's look at a little bit of that diversity in the Utah Lake region. This species is called horned pondweed or Xanachelea palustris, and it's called that because the seeds look like little horns. I think they look like bananas. And this species is a prolific seeder. It spreads pretty easily, and it can grow in pretty fast currents and rocky substrates. This is Chara, a genus of algae. The common names include stonewort, muskgrass, or stinkgrass. And it looks like a vascular plant, but it is an algae. And it has these little reproductive structures called oospores, which are kind of analogous to seeds. And research shows they can subsist in the sediment, even if it's dried out for hundreds of years. And Chara generally is really good at trapping the sediment that's floating in the water column. So it's good at improving water clarity. This is fine leaf pondweed, Stoechenia filiformis, and it has these long stems that can move around with the water. This is Ranunculus aquatilis, or whitewater crowfoot, and these finely dissected leaves are actually submerged in the water. And typically they have these stems that come up and the flower blooms above the surface of the water, which makes it a great resource for pollinators and is also really beautiful. This is coon-tail Ceratophyllum demersum, and it can grow in these large bushy individuals or also just as kind of one of these single arms, a single strand as well. And it's a floating species, so it's not rooted in the sediment, which makes it a bit more resilient to changes in water level because it can float with those fluctuations rather than just remaining rooted in the sediment. If you've seen a plant growing in Utah Lake, chances are it's this species, sago pondweed or Stoechenia pectinata. And sago pondweed can grow well in low water quality, which is why it's able to grow in Utah Lake. So with an exception of sago pondweed, all of these species were described as being present in the area by Walter Cottam in his 1926 dissertation on an ecological study of the flora of Utah Lake. However, even by Cottam's time, 95 years ago, there were some environmental stressors impacting the ecosystem, and a lot of this diversity was rapidly disappearing. And we've seen that continue, and it's impacted the lake greatly even to today. So let's dig into that a little bit more. So ecosystem functions are what an ecosystem does, or the processes that occur in the ecosystem. And aquatic plants are kind of a keystone group in ecosystem functioning of shallow aquatic ecosystems. And these are just a few examples of ecosystem functions that have been tied to aquatic plants: primary production, or the transformation of CO2 into organic compounds; nutrient cycling, for example, the way that nitrogen and phosphorus move around; sediment deposition, where sediment moves in the landscape and where it ends up; and habitat for aquatic organisms, big and small. And these ecosystem functions can be tied to ecosystem services, or the way ecosystems benefit us. And these can include, in shallow aquatic ecosystems, improved water quality, recreational opportunities like boating or swimming, and habitat for culturally important species such as fish or ducks, which kind of ties back to recreational opportunities. However, with the introduction of environmental stressors, these ecosystem functions can be disrupted and even disappear, which subsequently causes the change or disappearance of ecosystem services. In Utah Lake, these stressors include pollution from the nearby urban community and also the wastewater in the lake, the introduction of the common carp in the late 1800s. These carp root around in the substrate and uproot aquatic plants, and water manipulation, which causes these fluctuating water levels, which can be quite stressful to aquatic plants. And again, with these stressors comes a change or loss in ecosystem functions and a potential loss of ecosystem services. And this is one example of what might happen or what has happened when those ecosystem functions are disrupted. This is a harmful algal bloom near Linden Marina in 2016. And we've seen this issue persist and even grow in the last several years. The good news is that not all hope is lost. Aquatic plant restoration may help reestablish some of that ecosystem functioning. And one of the places where aquatic plant restoration is happening on Utah Lake is at the Provo River Delta Restoration Project. And I know Melissa Stamp is giving a great presentation on the project, but I'll just describe it in a nutshell, because this is where my master's research is taking place. So in a nutshell, what they're doing is diverting some of the flow from the channelized Provo River into this restoration site where they're excavating a series of braided channels and ponds. And the main goal of the project is to restore the June sucker, which is a threatened fish species that's endemic to Utah Lake, meaning it's only found in Utah Lake out of everywhere in the world, only Utah Lake. And a bit of background on the biology of the June sucker. So what they do when they reproduce is they travel upstream, up the tributaries to Utah Lake, primarily the Provo River, to spawn. And when the larvae are hatched, they drift downstream. And currently what they're lacking is a rearing habitat where they can find food and protection from predators. And that is a main goal of the Provo River Delta Restoration Project, to provide this habitat for the June sucker. And a crucial component of that is restoring the aquatic vegetation where they are able to hide from predators. In addition to that goal, they're restoring the natural ecosystem to the area. It's a great restoration project, and I'm excited to play a small role in it. So although aquatic plant restoration is very promising, there are some current issues in implementation, including extreme variability in plant establishment. So we put the plants out there, but do they survive? Do they grow? A lack of scalability in planting methods. So it's hard to plant large areas or requires a lot of resources. And also an unknown impact of species choices. So we're not sure of the best ways to put species together in order to address specific restoration goals. So these current issues led me to identify two main research areas to address with my master's research, including planting methods, or how the plants are introduced to the site, and invasion resistance, or the ecosystem properties that limit the invasion of introduced species, in this case, aquatic plant invaders. And to get at these key research areas, I will be conducting 3 experiments, 2 at the Provo River Delta Restoration site and 1 in a greenhouse mesocosm experiment. So at the Provo River Delta Restoration site, I will be looking at planting methods and 2 aspects of planting methods. First, planting design. Traditionally, in restorations, the plants are spaced out like this in order to reduce competition between them. However, some research shows that actually planting them clumped together, where they're actually touching, may promote facilitation or positive interactions between individuals of the same species, which may help mitigate some of the stressors in the environment. I'll also be looking at scalability. As you can see in these images here, hand planting can be really difficult or time consuming or require a lot of resources like scuba gear in order to accomplish actually putting the plants in by hand. So I'm looking at two different planting methods which would allow the propagules to be dropped from the surface of the water, which would increase the scalability by reducing the need for any hand planting to occur. My last experiment, I'll be looking at invasion resistance, focusing on two non-native plant invaders. This one is curly leaf pondweed, and this is Eurasian water milfoil. And I'll be looking at their invasibility in response to 4 different native species and 4 levels of species richness to start to get an idea of how to build these plant communities so that they're resistant to these invaders. So in terms of broader impacts, I hope that my research will aid aquatic plant restoration in both Utah Lake and more broadly by identifying successful and scalable planting methods, promoting an understanding of how different planting methods and designs can be harnessed in restoration, and informing species choices in restoration threatened by non-native plant invaders, which is certainly Utah Lake, the Intermountain West, and pretty much everywhere. So thank you very much for listening. If you have any questions, please reach out. My email is kate.sinnott@usu.edu. A big thanks to my funders, the Utah Reclamation, Mitigation, and Conservation Commission, and everyone at the USU Wetland Ecology and Restoration Lab. So thank you very much. Please reach out if you have any questions. Thanks.